In the cold void of space, Mercy's Light, a human hospital ship, drifted silently, its gleaming white hull standing out starkly against the endless darkness of the cosmos. The ship, emblazoned with the Red Cross symbol, the universal emblem of mercy, was a beacon of hope. It was a ship of healing, a floating sanctuary for those wounded in the wars of the galaxy, a testament to humanity's belief in compassion over conquest. Aboard the Dark Spear, a warship of the Dominion, Commander Vexor stood at the bridge, his six-fingered hands clasped behind his back. He stared at the distant hospital ship, his eyes cold with disdain. To him, Mercy's Light was the embodiment of everything wrong with humanity. In his mind, a vessel that size, built for healing, was nothing but a waste of resources. Mercy, he thought, was a weakness. Humanity's technology should have been devoted to war, to conquest, not the saving of lives. He turned to his bridge crew, his voice low and harsh, a growl escaping his throat. "Look at them," he said, his mandibles clicking with contempt. "A warship-sized vessel dedicated to healing. What a waste of resources." Beside him, Lieutenant Commander Kara Wren, a trusted officer, shifted uneasily at her tactical station. She had seen the impact of war, of destruction. But there was something unsettling about the sight of a hospital ship, so clearly dedicated to saving lives. It didn't sit right with her, especially knowing the risks they faced by simply existing. Yet she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something was wrong with what they were about to do. The attack on Mercy's Light was not a decision made lightly, but Vexor had made up his mind. He believed the galaxy operated on power, not kindness. Compassion, in his eyes, was a flaw, a fatal weakness that would allow weaker species to survive. Humanity had to learn that lesson. Blake Chen, a four-eyed officer who had served under Vexor for years, hesitated before speaking up. "Sir, the ship is currently treating wounded from the Sentry conflict," he said, his voice shaking with the weight of what they were about to do. "There are over 2,000 patients aboard, including civilians from 12 different species." Vexor's contempt deepened. "And that is precisely why humans will never dominate the galaxy," he spat. "They waste their technological prowess on compassion, on helping others. But what do they gain from this? What territories do they conquer?" "Nothing material," Blake Chen responded quietly. "But they gain diplomatic relationships, trust." Vexor's mandibles spread in a sneer. "Relationships are for species too weak to take what they want. The galaxy isn't built on relationships, Blake. It's built on power. And right now, that ship represents the greatest concentration of vulnerable beings in this sector." A cold silence fell over the bridge, the crew sensing the weight of the decision about to be made. Kara Wren's copper-scaled skin paled as the realization hit her. This was no longer about war, it was about sending a message that would be heard across the galaxy, and one that could never be undone. "Commander," she spoke cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "You can't be suggesting—" Vexor turned sharply to face her, his eyes narrowing in fury. "I can, and I am," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "Think of the message it will send, Kara. Mercy's Light, humanity's great symbol of mercy, reduced to atoms. It will show the galaxy that their compassion is a weakness, a fatal one." Kara Wren opened her mouth to protest again, but the words caught in her throat. She knew better than to challenge Vexor, but her heart ached at the thought of the innocent lives aboard the ship. Despite her discomfort, she knew there was no stopping the wheels that had already been set in motion. Vexor's eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. "We'll send them a message. Humanity will learn that their mercy is a liability." He turned away from the screen, addressing the rest of the bridge crew. His voice was final, unwavering. Target their primary medical bay. Make it quick, but make it clear. We'll strike at their very symbol of hope. The Dark Spear's weapon officer, HFY, hesitated, his fingers trembling as he began to input the coordinates. His eyes flicked nervously to the screen, watching as the energy readings climbed. The entire crew felt the weight of the decision. HFY could feel the sweat on his brow, but he didn't dare question the command. Vexor's voice broke the silence. Fire! The ship trembled as the primary beam shot out, a brilliant purple streak that cleaved through the darkness of space. The blast struck Mercy's light directly at its medical bay, tearing through the hull with a deafening explosion. Atmosphere vented into space in a spectacular plume, and the ship began to list, its emergency force fields flaring to life in a desperate attempt to save the vessel. On the screen, the devastation was clear. The ship's once pristine hull now fractured, chunks of it floating away, torn apart by the sheer force of the strike. The once lively beacon of Mercy now drifted as a shattered husk in the void. Kara Wren watched in stunned silence, her heart sinking. "There are children in the pediatric ward," she murmured, though her voice was barely audible over the chaos. Vexor's voice was cold, emotionless. "No mercy for Mercy." But as the damage spread and the ship broke apart, something unexpected happened. Other ships from different species, sensing the tragedy unfolding, began to broadcast desperate cries for help. Relion, Centauri, and others were pleading for the Dominion to cease fire. But Vexor remained unmoved. The bridge was silent, save for the crackling of the communications system, which now blared in all directions, warnings flashing across the screen. Vexor, his satisfaction growing, turned to the crew and issued his final command. "Prepare for the second strike. We will wipe out their engines. No escape." As Mercy's light began to lose its ability to function, escape pods launching frantically into space, Vexor stood at the bridge, a grim smile tugging at his lips. He was sending a message, and he knew the galaxy would hear it loud and clear. The final beam struck the ship's central core, and Mercy's light split in two. The once proud symbol of humanity's compassion was no more than a wreck now, broken apart by the sheer force of destruction. The shockwaves from the destruction of Mercy's light rippled through the galaxy. As the remnants of the hospital ship drifted, broken and lifeless, the universe held its breath. For the first time in centuries, the Dominion had made a grave mistake, one that would send ripples of terror and awe through every corner of known space. Within the dark interior of the Dark Spear, Commander Vexor stood at the helm, his eyes fixated on the now empty space where Mercy's light had once been. The satisfaction from the earlier destruction lingered, but it was not enough. He had destroyed their symbol, their most cherished hope. But there was a quiet nagging at the back of his mind, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. As the minutes ticked by, his thoughts were interrupted by an alarming ping on his communication console. Blake Chen, his subordinate, stood at the tactical station, his four eyes wide with shock. The screens before him flickered, displaying a surge of strange signals, massive energy readings emanating from all over space. It wasn't the usual disturbance from local traffic. No, this was something else, something far more alarming. "Sir, we're detecting quantum breaches. Massive ones," Blake stammered. "Energy readings, so high they're off the scale. The humans, they're responding." Vexor turned sharply, his mandibles snapping in frustration. "Impossible. he muttered under his breath. "They've barely been in space for 200 years. What could they possibly do?" But then it happened. Vexor's gaze shot to the view screen as massive shapes began to emerge from the void. They weren't ships like any he had ever seen. Darker, angular, almost otherworldly in their design. They were sleek and imposing, bristling with weapons of unimaginable power. The human ships that had arrived on the scene weren't the simple, peaceful vessels that Vexor had expected. They were warships, and they were far more advanced than anything the Dominion had ever faced. "These ships, they're massive," Blake Chen said in disbelief, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're everywhere. Dozens, no, hundreds of them." As the ships materialized, an eerie silence blanketed the dark sphere. Even the bridge crew could feel the weight of the situation. The Dominion had made an enemy of the wrong species. They had misjudged humanity's strength, assuming that Mercy's Light, a ship of healing, was all that the humans were capable of. But now, the true nature of humanity was becoming terrifyingly clear. The new ships moved with a terrifying precision, taking positions above every major Dominion world. No demands, no threats, just their cold, calculated arrival. And then, a voice rang out across all communication channels. "This is Admiral Sarah Hawthorne of the Earth Vengeance Fleet." The voice was calm, icy, and laced with a quiet fury. "You targeted our mercy. Now, you will face our wrath." Vexor's heart skipped a beat. He had expected retaliation. He had expected some form of resistance. But this was something else entirely. He had expected an appeal to diplomacy, a call for talks. Instead, humanity had unleashed a devastating fleet, a force that was unlike anything Vexor could have imagined. The message from Admiral Hawthorne was short, direct, no threats, no grand speeches, just a statement. It was a demonstration of power, a power that, up until now, Vexor had underestimated. As the words cut off, the space around Dark Spear seemed to crackle with energy. The quantum signatures around them were overwhelming, each one representing a human warship more powerful than anything they had encountered before. Vexor's jaw clenched as he stared at the incoming fleet, realizing that he had severely miscalculated. The battle was no longer just a matter of politics. It was now a question of survival. "All hands to battle stations," Vexor barked, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Prepare for engagement. These primitives think they can intimidate us. They will learn that the Dominion is not so easily defeated." But deep down, Vexor knew that his earlier confidence had begun to crumble. These ships, these humans, were something entirely different. Something beyond what the Dominion had prepared for. They were not just coming for vengeance. No, they were coming for something more. On the bridge of Mercy's Light, which was now floating in the wreckage, Sarah Hawthorne's voice came through the communications again, this time with chilling finality. "This is your last warning. Surrender now, or face the consequences of your actions." The words were simple. There was no anger in them, just cold, unyielding resolve. And Vexor realized that the time for mercy had long passed. The humans weren't here to negotiate. They were here to show the Dominion just how wrong they had been. At that moment, the vastness of the void outside the Dark Spear seemed to close in around Vexor. The weight of his actions, the consequences of underestimating the humans, were now becoming painfully clear. He had destroyed a symbol of mercy, but in return, he was about to witness the terrifying reality of what humanity could do when pushed too far. "Commander," Kara Wren spoke softly, her voice filled with dread. "We're not just facing a fleet. We're facing something more." We've triggered something we don't understand." Vexor's response was icy, his mind already racing through the options they had left. "Then we fight. We fight until there's nothing left to fight for." But as the first wave of human ships closed in, Vexor began to realize that Mercy's light wasn't the only thing humanity had built to heal. Their ships, their technology, their very way of life had evolved in a way he could never have anticipated. The humans weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to show the galaxy that mercy wasn't a weakness. It was the ultimate strength. And Vexor, along with the rest of the galaxy, would soon learn just how powerful that mercy truly was. The silence in the wake of the attack was deafening. The void of space, once a backdrop of hopeful exploration, now seemed eerily cold, as if the very fabric of the galaxy had shifted. The dark spear drifted through the darkness, its crew silent, some still grappling with what they had just witnessed. The warship, so certain of its superiority just hours before, now seemed out of place in the vast emptiness. Vexor stood at the helm, his mind racing, his once unshakable belief that strength, raw, unyielding strength, was the only thing that mattered, had been shattered. The attack on Mercy's light was meant to send a message. Humanity was weak, soft. Yet, in the blink of an eye, Earth had unleashed a devastating response, one that left the Dominion reeling in shock. As the Dark Spear moved further into Dominion space, the Vengeance Fleet's ships continued to materialize in orbit around key Dominion worlds. They had not just come for retaliation, they had come to prove something far more profound. The ships, sleek and angular, were like nothing Vexor had ever seen. They looked like shadows themselves, dark and foreboding, seemingly crafted to inspire fear. But it wasn't the ships that struck terror into Vexor's heart. It was the cold, calculating precision with which the humans moved. Over the next few hours, the Dominion fleet began to receive strange, unsettling transmissions. The humans were broadcasting something that felt both like a warning and a lesson. It wasn't a message full of threats or demands. It was far simpler. The Earthships didn't ask for surrender, nor did they demand peace. They simply showed the Dominion the consequences of their actions. "What are they doing?" Blake Chen asked, his voice cracking with uncertainty. His 4 eyes blinked nervously as the tactical screens flashed with new readings. The ships weren't engaging in battle. Instead, they were forming complex patterns in space, something far more advanced than any Dominion tactic. The Vengeance Fleet was not here to simply destroy. They were reshaping the battlefield itself, rearranging the very fabric of reality. Each human ship moved with precision, as if they were part of a larger organism, something alive, moving in perfect harmony. Vexor watched in growing disbelief as the screens displayed real-time data. Human warships were surrounding key Dominion planets, but it wasn't a siege. It was something else entirely. "What are they doing with their ships?" Vexor muttered to himself, his voice low, filled with the growing realization that his understanding of warfare, of power, was no longer enough. The answer came when a cold, commanding voice cut through the silence of the Dark Spear's communications channel. "This is Admiral Sarah Hawthorne of the Earth Vengeance Fleet," she said, the tone in her voice detached, almost clinical. "You attacked Mercy's light. Now you will face the consequences of your actions." There was no anger, no fury in her voice, just a quiet, unfathomable certainty. And then, as if to confirm her words, the Vengeance Fleet began to demonstrate their true power. On the screens, Vexor and his crew watched in horror as one of the human ships, the Vengeance-class flagship, began to activate a strange, radiant energy weapon. The weapon was unlike anything in the Dominion's database. It didn't launch missiles, nor did it fire traditional energy blasts. No, this weapon was something far more devastating. The energy beam that erupted from the flagship's core wasn't just a destructive force. It was a precision tool, surgical in nature. The beam struck the Dominion's orbital defense platform, but instead of obliterating it, it seemed to cut through reality itself. A perfect circle of space around the platform simply ceased to exist. It wasn't destroyed. It was edited out of existence. There was no explosion, no debris, just an absence. The crew of the Dark Spear stood frozen, their eyes wide, unable to comprehend what they were seeing. Vexor's jaw hung slightly open, his mind struggling to make sense of the scene unfolding before him. It was like watching a surgeon remove a tumor, an operation so precise, so delicate, that there was no question of its intent. It wasn't an act of violence. It was something else entirely. It was mercy, applied with the most terrifying level of control and power imaginable. The Dominion fleet was now in full retreat, but it didn't matter. The damage had been done. The human ships were moving through Dominion space, systematically disabling critical infrastructure without causing harm to civilian sectors. Each strike was meticulously calculated, surgically executed. Military installations, weapon platforms, even entire warships, erased, removed, excised from existence. "What are we facing?" Kara Wren asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her once proud scales had paled, a sign of her growing unease. "I don't know," Vexor muttered, his grip tightening on the armrest of his command chair. He had believed that Dominion power was supreme, that their way, the way of strength and dominance, was the only way. But now, as he watched human ships dismantle the Dominion's power with surgical precision, he realized that he had been wrong. "These humans, they're not like us," Vexor continued, his voice full of disbelief. "They're not fighting a war. They're performing surgery on reality itself. They're using our weaknesses against us. They're making us disappear." Blake Chen stood frozen, staring at the tactical display as more ships appeared. Smaller human vessels, sleek and fast, darting around the battlefield with ease. "They're not even trying to fight us. They're just removing us from existence." The realization hit hard. Vexor had thought that mercy's light had been the heart of humanity's weakness, the thing that would make them vulnerable. But instead, he had awakened something far worse: humanity's true nature. A species that had the power not just to destroy, but to erase the very existence of its enemies, without hesitation, without cruelty. Just with cold, precise mercy. And as Admiral Hawthorne's fleet continued its systematic dismantling of the Dominion, Vexor began to understand. Mercy was not a weakness. It was humanity's greatest strength, but it was a strength that now terrified him, for it was a power the Dominion could never hope to match. In the cold expanse of space, as the Dominion's warships retreated and the Vengeance fleet moved with eerie calm, Commander Vexor stood frozen, his once firm grip on his command now slipping. The monumental shift in the balance of power was not one he could deny any longer. His arrogance, his unyielding belief in the superiority of the Dominion had brought them to the brink of destruction, and he was beginning to realize that the humans were not going to stop until they had made their point. One that would echo across the galaxy for centuries to come. As the Dominion's forces scrambled to regroup, the Earth fleet did not press the attack immediately. Instead, they began to form tight, methodical patterns, their ships positioning themselves over key Dominion planets with uncanny precision. They were not merely surrounding them. No, the humans were doing something far more terrifying. Something far beyond any concept of war that Vexor had ever encountered. Vexor watched in disbelief as the humans' ships, with their sleek, angular designs, began to align in specific formations, as if they were painting a picture in the void. The sheer coordination was breathtaking. For a moment, it felt as though the humans were preparing for something much larger than any mere skirmish. "What are they doing?" Blake Chen asked in a voice tinged with fear, his eyes glued to the tactical screen. The strange quantum signatures of the human ships continued to glow brighter, and the air on the dark spear seemed to thrum with tension. Vexor clenched his fists. He had learned the hard way that humans had a level of technological sophistication far beyond anything his species could have imagined. But he had underestimated them in another way as well. Humans were not simply fighting with weapons. They were shaping the very battlefield itself. The next transmission from Admiral Sarah Hawthorne came with a chilling calm. It was as if she had already seen the outcome of the battle in her mind, and now, the rest of the galaxy was about to witness her demonstration. "This is Admiral Sarah Hawthorne of the Earth Vengeance Fleet," her voice rang out, its icy calm sending a shiver down the spines of those on the dark spear. "You have seen the power of mercy. Now you will see the consequences of your actions." The words were simple, almost detached in their delivery. But Vexor could feel the weight of them. Mercy had already been used to cripple the Dominion, but now the humans were preparing for something else. Something far more precise, far more terrifying. On the screen, the human ships began to glow with an unearthly light as their quantum shears powered up, energy radiating from their crystalline structures. The Vengeance Fleet had shifted positions, aligning in perfect synchronization over Dominion worlds. It was as if they had formed a shield around the Dominion itself, their presence both ominous and unyielding. And then, the demonstration began. Vexor watched, helpless, as a single human ship, no larger than a scout vessel, moved into position near one of Dominion's moons. The ship's hull rippled, a shimmering effect that seemed to warp space itself. A beam of impossibly dark energy shot out, a singular precise strike aimed at the moon's surface. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then, space around the beam shimmered. The energy pulse struck the moon's surface, and where it touched, reality itself seemed to stop. A perfect sphere of the moon's surface simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris, just a geometrically perfect void where matter had once been. It wasn't destruction. It was erasure. "That's impossible," Blake Chen breathed, his voice barely audible, his eyes wide with shock. Vexor had no words. What he had just witnessed defied everything he knew about physics, about war, about power. A human warship had just deleted an entire section of a moon from existence, without so much as a ripple of debris, without even the sound of an explosion. It was as if the laws of nature had been bent, rewritten, and then erased altogether. "That was at 3% capacity." The voice of Admiral Hawthorne came through again, cold and matter-of-fact. "Would you like to see 100%? It was then that Vexor realized. The humans were not here to negotiate. They were here to demonstrate. They had given him mercy, and now they were showing the full extent of their power. A power that went beyond mere destruction. A power that could alter the very fabric of the universe. The dark spear shook, as the next wave of energy surged through the human fleet. "Full containment protocols are in place," the voice of Admiral Hawthorne continued. "We are now entering the final phase." Human ships began to move once more, and the sight that greeted Vexor sent a wave of cold dread through his body. The ships, once scattered, had now come together, forming a massive network, a grid of energy that encircled Dominion space like an inescapable prison. Each ship, perfectly synchronized, began to rewrite space-time around the Dominion. A massive quantum grid began to form, one that bent the very laws of physics. The Dominion's ships, unable to escape the boundaries of this new reality, were trapped in a bubble of altered space-time. FTL drives went dark. Communications failed. The Dominion was no longer free. They were locked in place, isolated by the sheer might of the humans' quantum control. "We are now controlling the field of battle," Admiral Hawthorne's voice announced, calm but final. "We suggest you spend your remaining moments wisely." Vexor's mind raced, but the message was clear. The Dominion had been outmatched. There was no escape, no counterattack. The humans had shown their full might, and it was not through sheer force or weaponry alone. It was through their mastery of reality itself. And then, it happened. With a hum that sent vibrations through space itself, the quantum shears on the human fleet began to glow brighter, their energy intensifying. Vexor watched in horrified awe as human ships, using their strange quantum technology, began to delete the Dominion's military infrastructure, one target at a time. Massive weapon platforms, entire fleets, erased. Like a surgeon removing malignant tissue, the humans took out the heart of Dominion's might, but left the rest untouched. Not a single civilian infrastructure was harmed. The humans had learned to wield destruction with surgical precision, not to annihilate, but to remove the threat without causing any collateral damage. "This is not combat," Vexor whispered in disbelief. "This is surgery." The last remnants of the Dominion's military were disappearing before his eyes, swallowed up by the humans' terrifyingly precise method of war. As the dust settled across the battle-scarred regions of space, the silence that followed the demonstration of humanity's power was profound. The once proud Dominion fleet, once thought to be the pinnacle of military might, was no more. The human ships, dark and angular, hung suspended in the void, their energy weapons now silent, their purpose fulfilled. Vexor stood on the bridge of the dark spear, his posture defeated, his eyes fixed on the display screen. The Dominion military infrastructure had been all but erased, wiped clean from existence. Cities, stations, weapons platforms, fleets, all gone, vanished like a bad dream, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. For the first time in his life, Vexor felt truly small. He had been a predator, preying on weaker species, assuming that dominance could only be achieved through the crushing weight of power. But in the end, it was not through war that the humans had won. No, it was through mercy, and that was what terrified him. Blake Chen, his trusted officer, now stood beside him, his expression blank, his once calm demeanor replaced by an unmistakable sense of awe and fear. "We are trapped," he said quietly, barely able to comprehend the magnitude of the situation. The Dominion fleet was unable to move. Their faster-than-light drives were disabled, their weapons nullified. They were prisoners in their own space, and there was nothing they could do. The humans had created a quantum containment field, a boundary in space-time that they had not only sealed them within, but used to rewrite the laws of physics itself. The dark spear, for all its might, was nothing more than a helpless vessel caught in the web of human ingenuity. But the humans didn't just destroy. They didn't just punish. No. They had left Vexor and his crew with a lesson, one that was even more potent than the destruction of their military. What now? Kara Wren asked softly, her voice shaking as she looked at the empty space around them. The human ships had stopped their barrage, and the once imposing fleet now lay scattered, some of their vessels still intact, but rendered useless. The response came not from Vexor, but from the calm, commanding voice of Admiral Sarah Hawthorne. Her message echoed through the dark sphere, every word carrying the weight of not just a military victory, but a philosophical declaration. "This is Admiral Hawthorne of the Earth Vengeance Fleet," she began, her voice as measured and detached as ever. "You believed our mercy was a weakness. You mistook our compassion for an inability to fight. But let me show you what true power looks like." There was a long pause, the silence almost unbearable as the crew of the Dark Spear listened, breathless. "We are not here to destroy," Hawthorne continued. "We are here to remind you that mercy is not something you can exploit. It is not a weakness. It is the ultimate strength, the strength to choose not to harm when you have the power to annihilate. You attacked our hospital ship. You believed it would break us. Instead, you have shown us exactly why we choose mercy." The voice on the other end was final, without room for argument or discussion. "Humanity's mercy is not a flaw, Commander. It is the cornerstone of our civilization. We will continue to heal, to help, and to choose peace. But make no mistake, when we are pushed too far, we will not hesitate to show you the true extent of our strength." As the last echoes of her words faded from the comms, Vexor sank back into his command chair, his mind still reeling from what he had just learned. It wasn't the first strike, or even the systematic dismantling of his empire that had crushed him. It was the revelation, the understanding that humanity's power lay not in destruction, but in their restraint. In that moment, Vexor knew that the Dominion could never return to its former glory. They had fought a battle, but in doing so, they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And now, the galaxy would remember. Humanity had shown them that true strength was not in domination, but in the ability to choose mercy, even when you could destroy everything. The human message was clear. Vexor and his kind were no longer the ones who controlled the fate of the galaxy. Humanity, with its advanced technology and its merciful heart, was the new power on the horizon. The Dominion would surrender, not because they had been overpowered by superior weaponry, but because humanity had taught them a lesson they would never forget. The lesson that mercy, when wielded by a powerful species, was the most dangerous force in the universe. Vexor, now a prisoner of his own arrogance, felt a sinking despair. His crew, their faces pale and drawn, looked to him for answers, but there were none. Vexor had learned too late that mercy was not for the weak. It was for the strong. And in humanity's hands, it had been a weapon more devastating than any missile or laser beam. The Vengeance Fleet's ships continued to hold their positions above the Dominion worlds. Every human vessel now carried with it the unmistakable red cross of Mercy's light, a symbol that would be carried across the stars, forever intertwined with humanity's strength. As the days passed, the galaxy began to take notice. The Dominion, once the most powerful empire in the galaxy, was now a shadow of its former self. Its military might had been obliterated, its leadership captured, its forces dismantled, but instead of annihilating its enemies in an act of vengeance, humanity had shown restraint. Vexor, now in custody, would never forget the message the humans had left him with. Mercy is not a weakness, it is a choice, and it is the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. In the wake of the Dominion's collapse, a new era began to unfold. Admiral Hawthorne and Dr. Laura Chen watched from the Mercy's Promise Memorial Station, where the wreckage of Mercy's Light still floated as a symbol of the day humanity had demonstrated the true meaning of strength. Medical ships from all over the galaxy now docked here, each one equipped with the quantum shielding that humanity had pioneered. The new Galactic Medical Code had been ratified, and all species, whether out of respect or fear, had agreed to never again attack a hospital ship. As Hawthorne and Chen stood together on the observation deck, they knew that this victory would resonate far beyond just the Dominion. It was a victory for humanity's ideals of peace, healing, and compassion. Laura smiled softly. "Amazing how diplomatic everyone becomes when they understand the consequences," she said quietly, glancing at the ships preparing for departure. Hawthorne, her gaze fixed on the horizon, nodded. "Indeed, and now they understand. Mercy, when wielded by the strongest, is not a flaw. It is a force that can change the galaxy." The Mercy's light was gone, but its legacy lived on, brighter than ever, a testament to humanity's enduring strength and their unwavering commitment to healing the galaxy, one life at a time.